somewhere in the South China Sea. 1809. The sea was calm, too calm. A young Qing naval officer stood on the deck of his warship, staring across the horizon. The mission he had been given seemed straightforward enough. Find the pirates, destroy them, restore order. That was what empires always believed they could do. But as the morning mist began to lift, he saw something that shouldn't have existed. At first he thought they were clouds, dark shapes emerging from the haze. Then the shapes grew larger. Sails, dozens of them, then hundreds. Red banners fluttering in the wind, an entire horizon covered by ships. The officer felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't a pirate fleet. This was an army, a nation floating on water, and at the center of it stood the last person anyone expected. Not a warlord, not a prince, not an admiral, a woman. Within a year, the empire would stop trying to destroy her and start negotiating with her. This is the story of Ching Shih, the pirate queen who became too powerful to defeat. History loves heroes, history loves villains. But the people who change the world rarely fit into either category. They live somewhere in the uncomfortable space between. Too ruthless to be heroes, too intelligent to be simple villains. Few people embody that contradiction more completely than Ching Shih. A woman born into poverty. A woman whose name was never meant to survive history. A woman who would eventually command one of the largest pirate confederations the world has ever seen. Governments feared her. Merchants paid her. Navies hunted her. And unlike most pirates, she was never captured, never executed, never hanged. She retired wealthy, comfortable, and undefeated. But that raises a question. How does someone rise from obscurity to challenge an empire? How does a woman in 19th century China become one of the most powerful criminals in history? And perhaps most importantly, was Ching Shih truly a villain? Or was she simply better at understanding power than the people who tried to stop her? Chapter 1. The Invisible Girl. History rarely remembers people like her, the poor, the powerless, the forgotten, especially women, especially poor women born in 18th century China. Around the year 1775, somewhere along the southern coast of Guangdong province, a girl entered the world without knowing she would one day terrify governments. At the time, China was one of the largest and most powerful empires on earth. The Qing dynasty ruled hundreds of millions of people. Trade flowed through its ports, its merchants traveled across oceans, its cities bustled with wealth. But empires often look strongest from a distance. Up close, life was different. For ordinary families, survival could be fragile. One failed harvest, one storm, one illness, one bad season. Any of these could destroy a family's future. The girl who would become Ching Shih grew up in that reality. No palace, no privilege, no special education, no destiny. At least none that anyone could see. Most historians believe her birth name was Shi Yang. Beyond that, the details become unclear. And perhaps that's fitting, because nobody expected her life to matter. Nobody bothered recording it. History ignored her. For now, as she grew older, stories suggest she eventually found work aboard a floating brothel operating near Canton. Whether every detail is true remains debated. But the story has survived because it reveals something important about the world she inhabited. Most people imagine such places as centers of vice. And they were. But they were also centers of information. Merchants gathered there, officials gathered there, sailors gathered there, smugglers gathered there. Every night men with money and influence arrived carrying secrets, and every night those secrets leaked into the air. Imagine being invisible in a room full of powerful people. Nobody watches what they say, nobody guards their words, nobody considers you a threat. People reveal themselves, their fears, their ambitions, their weaknesses, the routes their ships will take, the cargo they carry, the officials they bribe, the enemies they fear, the opportunities they see. Powerful people often underestimate those they consider beneath them. History is full of rulers who made that mistake, and it would become one of the greatest advantages in Ching Shih's life, because while others talked, she listened. While others boasted, she observed. And while others saw only the world as it existed, She began learning how it really worked. The lesson was simple. Power rarely belongs to the strongest person in the room. It belongs to the person who understands everyone else. What nobody realized was that the invisible girl was paying attention, and soon someone else would notice her as well. Chapter 2. The Pirate Who Thought Bigger. The South China Sea was changing. Trade was booming. European merchants arrived in increasing numbers. Chinese goods flowed across oceans. Silver moved through ports. Fortunes were made overnight. Where wealth travels, predators follow. Piracy exploded. Small bands of raiders attacked merchant ships. Smugglers expanded their operations. Criminal networks grew. Most pirate captains thought only about survival. The next raid, the next payday, the next ship. But one man thought bigger. His name was Ching Shih. Unlike ordinary pirates, Ching Shih understood that real power wasn't found in a single ship, or even 10 ships. Real power came from organization. He began building alliances among competing pirate groups, convincing rivals to cooperate, creating relationships between fleets, transforming scattered criminals into something more dangerous, a coalition. This was incredibly difficult. Criminal organizations rarely trust each other. Greed destroys alliances, ego destroys alliances, fear destroys alliances. Yet somehow Ching Shih managed to bring rival groups together. The result was the beginning of a pirate confederation unlike anything the region had seen before. And somewhere during this rise, he encountered Shi Yang. Most stories describe their meeting romantically. Perhaps there was romance, perhaps there wasn't. History doesn't always reveal motivations. What seems clear is that Ching Shih recognized her value. Because intelligent leaders eventually learn something important. Talent can come from unexpected places. A person doesn't need noble blood to understand power. They don't need a title, or a rank, or an education. Sometimes they simply need the ability to read people better than everyone else. Whatever the reason, Ching Shih married her, and with that decision, the course of history changed. For the next several years, Ching Shih received an education no school could provide. She learned trade routes, naval logistics, pirate politics, alliance building, negotiation, leadership. Most importantly, she learned how power moved through networks of people. She watched ambitious men compete. She watched leaders rise. She watched leaders fall. And she learned that every organization, no matter how large, depended on one thing: loyalty. The problem was that loyalty is fragile. Soon she would discover just how fragile. Chapter 3. The Death of a King. In November of 1807, Ching Shih died. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. Some accounts suggest a storm, others point toward an accident. The details have been lost to time. But one fact is undeniable: the most important man in the pirate confederation was gone. The moment news spread, ambitious men began calculating. Who would take control? Who would inherit the fleets? Who would command the loyalty of thousands? The situation looked familiar. History had seen it countless times before. A powerful leader dies, rivals emerge, the organization fractures, civil war begins, everything collapses. Most observers expected exactly that. And from a distance, it seemed inevitable. After all, why would hardened pirate captains follow a woman? Why would powerful commanders surrender authority? Why would ambitious men accept her leadership? The answer is simple: because Ching Shih understood something they didn't. Power vacuums don't remain empty for long. The person who moves first often wins. While others debated, she acted. While others hesitated, she built alliances. While others dreamed about taking power, she was already taking it. And before anyone fully understood what was happening, she had positioned herself at the center of the confederation. Not through brute force, through strategy. The most dangerous victories are often invisible until they're complete. And Ching Shih was proving herself a master strategist. What happened next would transform a pirate alliance into something far more powerful, something that would make governments nervous, something that would force an empire to pay attention. Chapter 4. Building the Floating Empire. Most pirates are remembered for breaking rules. Ching Shih became powerful by creating them. That may sound strange, but it reveals the difference between a criminal and a ruler. Criminals take advantage of chaos, rulers control it. And Ching Shih wanted control. As thousands of pirates came under her influence, she recognized a dangerous truth. An organization that large could destroy itself from within. Arguments, theft, disobedience, personal grudges, all could become fatal. So she imposed discipline, strict discipline. Loot would be distributed according to rules. Unauthorized theft would be punished, orders would be obeyed, chains of command would be respected. The message was clear. This was no longer a loose collection of raiders. This was an institution, and institutions survive because people believe the rules matter. Many pirates undoubtedly hated these restrictions, but they worked. The Confederation became more organized, more efficient, more profitable, and therefore more attractive to recruits. Success attracted followers. Followers created more success. Within a remarkably short period, Ching Shih found herself commanding a force unlike anything the Qing government had imagined. The invisible girl from Guangdong had become one of the most powerful figures in the South China Sea, and she was only getting started. The empire had not yet realized the scale of the threat, but it would soon. Because the next phase of her rise would transform piracy into something far more dangerous: a business, a government, and eventually a rival power. Chapter 5. The Woman Who Taxed the Sea. By 1808, something unusual was happening along the southern coast of China. Pirates were no longer behaving like pirates, at least not in the way most people imagine. There were still raids, there was still violence, ships were still captured. But increasingly, Ching Shih's confederation was discovering something far more profitable than robbery: predictability. Imagine you are a merchant captain leaving Canton. Your ship is loaded with tea, silk, porcelain, and spices. Months of profit sit below deck. Your investors expect a return. Your crew expects payment. Your family expects you to come home alive. Then a lookout spots sails on the horizon. Panic spreads across the deck. The sailors know what this means. Pirates. The crew prepares for battle. Cannons are loaded. Weapons are distributed. Men whisper prayers. Then something unexpected happens. The pirate vessel approaches. No cannons fire, no boarding party rushes across. Instead, a representative climbs aboard carrying a ledger. Not a sword. A ledger. He calmly explains the situation. A fee is required. Pay it and your ship may continue. Refuse and the consequences are yours to discover. The merchant studies the pirate official. Then he studies the horizon. There are more pirate ships. Many more. He pays. The transaction is recorded. The pirates depart. Weeks later, he reaches his destination safely. In a strange twist of history, many merchants began viewing the pirate confederation as more predictable than the government. The pirates enforced agreements. The pirates protected revenue streams. The pirates understood business. That doesn't make them noble, it makes them practical. And practicality is often more powerful than ideology. This was one of Ching Shih's greatest insights. A merchant who fears you may avoid your waters, a merchant who depends on you becomes a customer. The distinction changed everything. Gradually, piracy evolved into taxation, protection, administration. The Confederation was becoming something new, something far more dangerous than a criminal gang. It was becoming a competing authority. And every successful government throughout history has eventually encountered the same problem. People begin asking a simple question: who is really in charge? The merchant. For one merchant captain sailing toward Macau, the answer became painfully clear. His vessel carried enough cargo to support his family for years. When pirate representatives arrived, he reluctantly paid. Several members of his crew complained. They argued that surrendering money only encouraged criminals. The captain disagreed. He had seen too much. He had seen ships burned, crews slaughtered, cargoes vanish. The pirates offered certainty. The sea offered none. Years later, when recounting the experience, he reportedly described the payment not as extortion, but as insurance. And perhaps that was the most remarkable thing about Ching Shih's empire. People had begun budgeting for piracy. As money flowed into the Confederation, its influence expanded. And with every passing month, the red flag fleet grew larger. Soon, it would become impossible to ignore. Chapter 6. The Red Flag Fleet. From a distance, it must have looked impossible. An entire horizon covered with sails, red banners snapping in the wind, ships moving together with surprising coordination, smoke rising from floating kitchens, messengers carrying orders, scouts watching every approach. The Red Flag Fleet was becoming a legend. And like all legends, reality and myth began blending together. Even today, historians debate the exact size of Ching Shih's forces. Some estimates suggest hundreds of vessels. Others suggest more than 1,000 if support ships are included. The exact number matters less than the broader truth. It was enormous, larger than many national navies, large enough to reshape regional trade, large enough to challenge governments, and large enough to create a problem no pirate leader had ever fully solved. How do you control thousands of criminals? Most organizations collapse long before reaching this size, not because enemies destroy them, because internal conflict does. Greed, jealousy, ambition, every successful criminal empire eventually faces the same threat: its own members. Ching Shih understood this. That is why discipline became central to her rule. A pirate caught stealing from communal funds could face severe punishment. Disobedience was punished. Unauthorized violence was punished. Desertion was punished. The message was unmistakable. The Confederation belonged to everyone, and anyone who endangered it endangered themselves. Many historians focus on her military achievements, but her administrative achievements may have been even more impressive. Winning battles is difficult. Managing thousands of ambitious people is harder. Because ships can be repaired, trust cannot. And somehow, year after year, she kept the organization together. That may have been her greatest victory. Not defeating enemies, preventing allies from becoming enemies. The recruit. Picture a young fisherman from Guangdong. His family's nets have produced little. Storms have damaged their boat. Food is scarce. Then a recruiter arrives, not with threats, with promises. Food, income, status, opportunity. For the young man, piracy isn't a moral decision, it's an economic one. Join the pirates and survive. Stay where you are and struggle. Thousands made similar calculations. The empire called them criminals. They called themselves survivors. And every new recruit strengthened Ching Shih's position. By now, her confederation had become too large to ignore. Merchants complained. Officials panicked. Governors demanded action. The empire could tolerate piracy. What it could not tolerate was competition. Chapter 7. The empire panics. Governments can survive many things: corruption, inefficiency, economic hardship, even military defeats. But there is one thing governments fear above all else: irrelevance, and increasingly Ching Shih's confederation threatened to make the Qing government irrelevant along parts of the southern coast. Reports flooded into government offices: merchant vessels disappearing, coastal communities paying tribute, trade routes shifting, pirates collecting revenue that should have belonged to the state. Each report painted the same disturbing picture. The empire ruled on paper. The pirates ruled in practice. This wasn't merely embarrassing, it was dangerous, because authority depends on perception. People obey governments because they believe governments possess power. The moment that belief weakens, cracks begin to appear. And cracks have a habit of spreading. Imperial officials began demanding stronger responses. Naval forces were mobilized. New commanders received orders, resources were allocated, the pirates would be crushed. At least that was the plan. But plans made in government offices rarely survive first contact with reality, especially when reality is commanded by someone who understands incentives better than bureaucrats. The village elder. One village elder found himself trapped between two worlds. An imperial tax collector arrived demanding payment. 3 days later, Pirate representatives arrived demanding tribute. Refusing either side could bring disaster, so the village paid both. The elder later described the situation as living between two storms. One flew the emperor's flag, the other flew red banners. Neither accepted excuses. For ordinary people caught in the middle, politics became simple. Pay whoever can hurt you most, and increasingly, that was Qing Shih. The empire had finally decided to fight, but fighting pirates on the open sea is one thing. Fighting an organization that behaves like a nation is something else entirely. Chapter 8. War against the Dragon Throne. The Qing Empire possessed enormous advantages: resources, shipyards, taxes, manpower, official authority. On paper, the outcome seemed inevitable. How could pirates possibly defeat an empire? History offers a simple answer. By refusing to fight on the empire's terms, Ching Shih understood something many military leaders never learn. You do not need to destroy your enemy. You only need to make victory too expensive. Again and again, naval forces sailed south with confidence. Again and again, reality intervened. Pirate scouts monitored movements. Local communities shared information. Merchant networks carried rumors. The Confederation often knew what the government was planning before government commanders even arrived. The sea itself became a weapon: hidden coves, narrow channels, changing winds, unexpected currents. Every advantage was exploited, every weakness was studied. Then came the battles, warships exchanging cannon fire, smoke rolling across the water, men screaming over the sound of explosions, splintered wood flying through the air. The South China Sea became a battlefield, and while the government expected quick victories, many campaigns ended in frustration. Pirate vessels dispersed when necessary, concentrated when advantageous, retreated when threatened, attacked when opportunities appeared. They behaved less like criminals and more like experienced military commanders, because by now many of them were. For government officers, the situation became increasingly humiliating. Every failed operation strengthened the legend. Every escaped fleet increased recruitment. Every pirate victory attracted new followers. The Confederation fed on success, and success was becoming a habit. Yet military victories alone do not explain Qing Shih's rise. To understand her true power, we must look beyond the battles, beyond the ships, beyond the cannons. We must look into the minds of the people who chose to follow her. Because the greatest weapon she possessed wasn't her fleet. It was her ability to make thousands of people believe their future depended on her success. And that is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Power. Military victories alone cannot explain Qing Shih's success. Cannons can win battles, fear can force obedience, but neither can hold together an organization numbering in the tens of thousands. To understand Qing Shih's rise, we need to look beyond ships and treasure. We need to understand the people who followed her. History often portrays pirates as rebels, outcasts, adventurers, but most were something far less romantic. They were people looking for opportunity. Many came from poverty. Many had few alternatives. Some had been fishermen, others sailors. Some were deserters, some were criminals. Many were simply desperate. And desperation has always been one of history's most powerful recruiting tools. For these men, piracy offered something the empire often could not: a chance to improve their lives, a chance to gain status, a chance to become someone. This doesn't excuse their actions, but it helps explain them. Because people rarely see themselves as villains. Most believe they are making rational choices in difficult circumstances. The pirate who boards a merchant vessel may see himself as a criminal, or he may see himself as a provider feeding his family. The official collecting taxes may see himself as serving the empire, or he may simply be protecting his position. Perspective changes everything, and Qing Shih understood perspective better than most rulers. She understood incentives, she understood loyalty, she understood ambition. Most importantly, she understood that people will endure tremendous risks if they believe those risks offer a better future. That insight became the foundation of her power. Because while the Qing government relied on authority, Ching Shih relied on opportunity, and opportunity is often far more persuasive. The recruit who chose the sea. A young man stood on a dock watching pirate ships disappear into the horizon. His father wanted him to fish. His village wanted him to stay. The empire wanted his obedience, but obedience had never filled an empty stomach. The pirates offered wages, food, adventure, status. 3 months later, he joined them. Within a year, he owned more wealth than his family had seen in generations. To historians, he became another pirate. To his family, he became a success story. And therein lies one of history's uncomfortable truths. The line between criminal and hero often depends on where you're standing. By now, Ching Shih's influence stretched far beyond piracy. Merchants discussed her, governors feared her, even foreign powers began paying attention. And when outside powers start watching, local conflicts rarely stay local for long. Chapter 10. When the world takes notice. The South China Sea wasn't important only to China. It was one of the busiest trade regions on Earth. European merchants sailed its waters. Portuguese traders operated from Macau. International commerce depended upon stability, and stability was becoming increasingly difficult to guarantee. Every captured merchant vessel created consequences. Every disrupted trade route created losses. Every pirate victory created uncertainty. Foreign observers watched carefully. Some admired the efficiency of the Confederation, others viewed it as a growing threat. But nearly everyone agreed on one thing. The pirates were no longer a temporary problem. They had become a political reality. And political realities force difficult decisions. Governments can sometimes destroy an enemy, but first they must decide whether destruction is worth the cost. That calculation would soon become central to Ching Shih's story. Because while military commanders prepared for more conflict, Ching Shih was beginning to think several moves ahead. The best strategists understand something many leaders never learn. Winning a war and surviving a war are not the same thing, and survival was always her ultimate objective. The foreign merchant. A Portuguese merchant arriving in Macau heard the same warning repeatedly. Avoid certain routes, pay attention to the flags, don't underestimate the pirates. At first he laughed, then he saw the shipping records, missing vessels, delayed cargo, lost fortunes. By the end of the year, he wasn't laughing. He was adjusting his business plans around the activities of a pirate queen. That realization would have seemed absurd only a few years earlier. Now it was simply reality. Most criminal empires end the same way. Bloodshed, betrayal, execution. History expected Ching Shih to follow the same path. Instead, she chose something far more difficult. Chapter 11. The masterstroke. Power changes people, success changes people, and sometimes success destroys people. History is filled with leaders who mistook temporary victories for permanent invincibility. Ching Shih did not make that mistake. By 1810, the political landscape was shifting. Pressure was increasing, military campaigns continued. Trade disruptions created tension, the future was becoming unpredictable. Many leaders would have doubled down, expanded further, taken greater risks. Ching Shih did something different. She looked for an exit. Not because she was weak, because she was realistic. This may have been the smartest decision of her entire career. Negotiations began. The details remain debated by historians. But the broad outcome is clear. The Qing government offered amnesty. Many pirates received pardons. Some entered official service. Wealth was retained. Lives were spared. The empire that had spent years trying to destroy the Confederation was now willing to make a deal. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful government in the region could not simply eliminate her. Instead, it negotiated. Not because it admired her, not because it approved of her. Because negotiation had become cheaper than continued conflict. That was her true victory. Not defeating the empire, making the empire decide that peace was the better option. Most pirates dream of treasure. Most criminals dream of power. Very few ever achieved legitimacy. Ching Shih came closer than almost anyone, and she did it without firing a final shot. The naval officer. The same young officer who once stared at the horizon covered in red sails could hardly believe the news. Negotiations, amnesty, pardons. Years of fighting had led to this. Part of him was angry, part of him was relieved. But as he reflected on the situation, he began to understand. Wars are not ended by pride, wars are ended by practicality. And practicality had always been Ching Shih's greatest weapon. Most pirate legends end with a rope around the neck. Ching Shih's story ended very differently. Chapter 12. Walking away. The most difficult thing for many powerful people is knowing when to stop. Conquerors keep conquering. Politicians keep campaigning. Criminal leaders keep expanding. Eventually, ambition consumes them. Ching Shih avoided that fate. She walked away. No dramatic final battle. No betrayal by trusted allies. No desperate last stand against overwhelming odds. She simply retired. Accounts differ regarding the details of her later life. Some suggest she operated a gambling house. Others emphasize her wealth and comfort. The specifics matter less than the outcome. She survived. In the brutal world of piracy, survival was extraordinary. Many of her contemporaries ended their lives in prison, on execution grounds, or at the bottom of the sea. She spent hers in relative peace, watching the world move forward, watching empires continue their endless struggles, watching history unfold. For a woman who had once been invisible, it was a remarkable ending. Not because she became famous, but because she lived long enough to enjoy the victory. Conclusion. History wants simple stories: heroes, villains, saints, monsters. Reality rarely cooperates. Ching Shih was not a hero. Her power emerged from violence. Her wealth came through criminal enterprise. Her fleets brought suffering to countless people. Those facts should not be ignored. But reducing her to a villain misses something important. She was a strategist, a negotiator, an administrator, a leader who understood power with unusual clarity. She recognized that fear alone cannot sustain an empire. That discipline is more valuable than chaos. That information is more valuable than strength. And that the smartest victory is often the one that avoids the final battle entirely. More than 2 centuries later, her story still fascinates us. Not because she was good, not because she was evil, but because she exposed a truth that many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Power does not belong to the strongest person. Power belongs to the person who understands the game, and few people ever understood the game better than Ching Shih, the pirate queen of the South China Sea, a criminal, a ruler, an anti-hero, and perhaps the only pirate in history who forced an empire to negotiate on her terms.